Hi, my name is Gibson, and I'm the co-owner and creator of the Personal Development School. This is your daily breakthrough video, and in this video, I want to talk to you a little bit about the hardest things about being a fearful avoidant attachment style, also known as a disorganized or anxious avoidant attachment style. So before I dive into these things and what you can do about them, please know that we have a promotion. The coupon code is with you, all one word. There's a link in the description box below. It's for 25% off 3, 6, and 12-month bundles. And that's for the all access pass. That gives you access to 40 plus courses we have inside of the school, the 4 live calls I do with students every single week. And there's a money back guarantee if you're not over the moon with all of the progress and amazing stuff that comes out of the school. We have a very, very high success rate of people within 90 days who are becoming securely attached. This is if they're doing daily work or pretty much daily work, even if it's for like 15 minutes a day, just like a reprogramming activity. But the amount of people coming out of the school, becoming secure, finding new relationships, feeling amazing, feeling like they can speak up for themselves and have boundaries and feel safe doing so, all these different things, knowing their needs, reprogramming these painful beliefs. It doesn't just end up helping your relationships, friendships, romantic and family relationships, but also your career and the limiting beliefs you have about yourself there and your relationship to money and all these different things. So check it out. The opportunity is there for people to try it. And if they're not super, super over the moon and really happy with everything there is to offer, then there is that money back guarantee. So you can check it out. So let's talk about this topic. This is something that before I dive into really talking about everything we'll put together in this video, I just want you to know, as you hear some of these things, as they resonate with you, as you relate to them, that this isn't like the path you have to stay on forever. Okay. So don't feel discouraged. I think this might bring up some feelings that are really real for fearful avoidance. So a couple things. Number one, I think one of the hardest things about being a fearful avoidant is literally that relationships in general that have emotional intimacy required, like basically romantic relationships more than anything else, can be overwhelmingly difficult at times. And they become overwhelmingly difficult while at the same time, the fearful avoidant, if they're really honest with themselves, they want love. They really want closeness. They really want loyalty. They really want intimacy. They really want people to love them and see them for who they are at their core, and to feel like they can love and see somebody else for who they are at their core. And when you have such a deep desire for that, but then you have all of these programs that are limiting you or pulling you back, like the fear of trusting, the fear of opening up and being vulnerable, the fear of being betrayed, the fear of being trapped or helpless or stuck in the wrong thing, the fear of not being able to say no and get out of something if you're not happy in it, the fear of being abandoned or hurt by somebody in some way, the fear of being unworthy or bad and feeling all the guilt and shame, all these things are basically equally painful to the amount of desire you have to want closeness and want a relationship. And so there can be this dynamic of you get so stuck in the push pull. It's like you take a step forward, then you take a step back. You take 2 steps forward, you take 2 steps back. And it just feels like you're trudging through deep, thick mud for a lot of fearful avoidance. And you should know, if this is relating to you right now, that that's A, that doesn't have to be the way it is forever. And B, it's not your fault that you're in that position. And it is your responsibility, but it's not your fault. And this is the result of having some kind of childhood dynamic. And it can be with your parents, it can be with other caregivers you had in your life, it could be with relationships you had with coaches or mentors or people very close to you, who created some traumatic imprints that really hurt and made you fear love and emotional intimacy and closeness, and fear being vulnerable to the same degree that you want it. And this is where that pendulum swinging feeling comes from for fearful avoidance. It's like you want love and you reach out and then it feels too scary, or it hurts a little bit because you get hurt quite easily by things. Not because you're weak or anything like that. And I know that can be a core belief for fearful avoidance, but because you're afraid, right? If you're really honest, it's like, oh, this thing that the person's doing, their behavior reminds me of this thing that person did. And if that person could hurt me, this person could hurt me too. And so you want to reach out and then you pull back, and you want to reach out and you pull back. And there's that like inner turmoil that happens. And I would say that's the second biggest thing for fearful avoidance. It's really challenging is that there's a lot of this like really wanting to make headway and to make progress. And then the swing from anxious to avoidant, the swing from like being on the high of the top of the roller coaster and then going to the low, that juxtaposition of like those two worlds and how often they sort of rotate as you go up and down the roller coaster in relationships, or as you go from anxious to avoidant, is confusing. It's very confusing for the fearful avoidant. It's not just confusing for the partners of fearful avoidance. And I think it's really important that we like recognize this. And I want you guys to know, like, I'm doing this series about like the hardest part of each attachment style, not so that we can like get stuck in this idea or story of like, oh, life is so hard, but so that people who don't know this can empathize effectively by understanding the internal worlds of each style. And that's like the big reason that this is here. And also so that each individual person who is of an insecure attachment style can empathize with themselves and can see themselves as a human being and recognize their struggles and be gentle and kind and compassionate to themselves during this process. So yeah, so that's a big one, is like the confusion that happens. Another big one is the storytelling. The storytelling is like how much you'll personalize things. It's like, because you've been hurt before, you'll make people's actions mean those same things that did happen to you in the past. And it's very common. And it doesn't mean that sometimes it doesn't happen, because yes, people will hurt you and do wrong things sometimes in our adult lives and in relationships. But usually there's like a personalization narrative running almost all the time in the background. It's like, oh, the person didn't get back to me when they said they would. Oh, it's because they don't care about me. I'm not worthy of being cared for or cared about. Or, oh, the person's patterns changed, and oh my goodness, that's because they're about to abandon me because people don't stay for me. I'm not worthy of, people sticking around. And these narratives are like the injustice, because it's like you've already been through that pain in the past, or the suffering in whatever form that took. And it's another layer of suffering now being added because of the fact that you are in this, like, you have this pre-programmed story that's coming out, right? That's like the meaning you gave to something the first time. And now it gets reprojected back out. And now somebody behaving badly, you're making that about your character. You're making that about who you are at the core. Somebody not worthy of being, loved, or somebody not worthy of somebody sticking around for, and like, what an injustice that somebody has programs, or they make a mistake, or they're being a not so great person, and then you make that mean something about your character, who you are at the core. That's a huge injustice, right? It's like we want to be able to recognize instead a pattern shifted. Let me go ask about it. Let me communicate about it. Let me like talk about it and have a conversation that's open and honest and try to get to the root of it, instead of making it mean something painful about me and then storing that story, idea, concept, or belief about myself as a byproduct of how other people behave. Because people are not going to behave in a perfect way all the time. In fact, most people will behave in a way that's outside of our comfort zone the vast majority of the time, or do things that we don't expect, especially in the earlier stages of a relationship, and especially in the power struggle being one of that, halfway through earlier stage. So really important to recognize that dynamic. And then I would say as well, some of the like inherent guilt and shame fearful avoidance feel a lot can be a big part of like what's so difficult, is they will be so boundaryless a lot of the time, and like over give, and then under receive, and then feel resentful. And then at some point in time, it's like they become frustrated with that, or volatile, or upset, because they literally carry a belief that I cannot communicate my needs. It's too vulnerable, or it's unsafe, or they won't get met anyways, or it'll make me weak. And then they, from that place, at some point in time, feel frustrated because they believe and feel and are experiencing themselves giving, and then not getting anything in return, or not getting what they're really secretly hoping for in return. Then they get angry and frustrated, and maybe say something that's rude or sharp, or do something to push somebody away, or protect themselves. And then they feel tremendous guilt and shame afterwards. And this becomes quite cyclical. And that can be very challenging for a fearful avoidant as well. How do you change that? You learn what your needs are. You break through the program that says it's unsafe to be vulnerable. And instead, or I'm weak if I'm vulnerable, both of them, right? And instead it's like, no, it takes strength to be vulnerable. And it's safe to be vulnerable, because if somebody doesn't respond the way I need them to, that's okay. I'm choosing to be vulnerable for me, not for the reaction I get, but to actually take ownership of my boundaries and my needs, and to share them and advocate for them, so I stand up in the relationship to myself. And so the dynamic of that is so important. And then also, like, think of what happens if you're in a dynamic where you're never communicating your needs, and then you're giving so much to somebody else. The moment they don't mind read your needs properly, which is like just a matter of time, because people aren't supposed to mind read, we're supposed to talk and discuss and communicate openly. Then instead, when that happens, it's like, oh my gosh, I must be unloved because I give so much and I'm still not receiving. And so there's this dynamic of like needs not being met, and the magnitude of pain that causes, or suffering even, the moment we give the needs unmet meaning. Oh, it's because I'm unlovable, it's because I'm not worthy, it's because I should be better in this that way or that way, and that would make the person meet my needs. Instead of, no, they don't know, and I need to communicate them and share them and advocate for them and practice receiving them effectively, and all these different things. So I would say the dynamic of that is very painful as well for fearful avoidance. And the last thing I would say is that for fearful avoidance, they carry that big trust wound. And it is so important to do the work on reprogramming your internal trust baseline. I have a whole course on this inside the school, and it's about like learning to trust in a healthy way. It doesn't mean ignore red flags and don't be cautious. It means notice those things and take those things into consideration, but not from the point of, like always being so hyper vigilant about every little thing that could go wrong, and then giving it meaning, then pulling away and trying to protect yourself, because sometimes those things that we're seeing are solvable problems that can be solved through discussion, through setting a boundary, through sharing something. Hey, that thing made me feel uncomfortable or insecure, or that touched a wound for me, or that makes me feel afraid. Or, hey, can you clarify that thing that happened? Or, hey, I could use some reassurance. Like, a lot of the things that a fearful avoidant runs away from are actually quite solvable at the end of the day. So, with all of that being said, hopefully this gives you some different perspectives. And hopefully this also allows you to be a little bit empathetic in the relationship to yourself, because sometimes fearful avoidants can be very critical of themselves and harsh on themselves, and not give themselves much breathing room when they do make mistakes. And that the point here is to be able to empathize with yourself, see yourself like a human who's been through some stuff, who can reprogram and shift out of that stuff, and who deserves love and connection, and deserves to feel safe in love and connection. And like I always say, like the same way you got those programs to begin with, you can deprogram those things. We're not born with these things. We're not stuck with them for life. We have neuroplasticity. We can change things at any time. So please know that as well. And hopefully some of this video gives you context for how to do so. Thank you so much for being here and for watching. Please like, share, and subscribe if you're getting a lot of value out of this channel. And I will see you in the next video.